Welcome back, everyone. Robert Marzullo here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on the spine creation. And the reason why this is so important is because everything is housed off the spine and everything kind of weights against the spine. So if you have a better understanding of the way the spines are kind of structured, then you're going to be able to come up with lots of cool creature concepts. And it's just a great place to start. So if you've ever drawn bodies, like figure drawing, you're going to do things like an action line. You're going to find the most significant line through the body. A lot of times that will relate to the spine, just because of things like posture and again the weight and the everything's kind of housed on that. So what we're going to do first is just draw out a spine to a human character, really because it helps us to see by comparison. So we have a little bit better understanding naturally of the human spine, even though we don't really see it in this fashion very often. But we understand the posturing and the weight, and we see a lot of people in the way they stand, so we can relate to it. From there, we're going to take that information and we're going to draw out a few others, and then we're going to see the differences. And a lot of times when you're doing creature design concepts and drawing anything really, but it very much relates to creature design, you'll do a lot of things by comparison. So when you draw out a certain character, you'll look at it and kind of analyze it and go, okay, how can I make this a bit cooler? How can I stretch the magnitude of the size of the ferocity, or whatever it is you're trying to convey in that creature design? Is it more innocent and a loving type little creature? Then you do that comparatively. You look at the things that are working and the things that aren't, and you just maneuver. And that's what sketching is all about. Even what you see me doing here, I'm sketching out these pieces of the spine. They're not entirely correct, and it's probably a lot more imaginative in some ways, but it'll get the point across. But each time I soft erase and resketch, I'm fixing little components of it. I'm adjusting things, I'm moving them around, I'm checking the work, things like that. So that's the same way that you're going to sketch out your creature concepts, and each time you're going to hone it. And we're going to talk about that with thumbnailing. Thumbnailing is a great way to be able to do just that. And it's just slightly moving the lines around, slightly adjusting things until you keep getting a better and better version of what it is you're trying to put down. So if you notice with the spine here, there's a lot of curvature. It's not just straight up and down. And that's why I wanted to do a profile to really show that, because it's very easy to draw characters and creatures too straight up and down and really getting this repetitious kind of behavior of drawing the same static kind of pose. And it's very important not only just in character design to get anything less than static, dynamic, as much as possible, but with creature design, it goes into a whole nother level because there's a lot more expressive behavior in the body of creatures. There's just so many things that you can accomplish and so many rules that you can break with creature design that you really don't want things to be straight up and down at all. Pretty much never. So what you want to do here is really focus on the ability to draw out these spines in a really imaginative way. But again, we're going to start with a base of realism, and the thing that we know most realistically would be the human spine. And keep in mind, there's lots of humanoid characters where understanding the spine and the rib cage and the cranium like this will still help you with those types of designs as well. So just finishing this off and drawing through this and getting enough of that information in place to understand it. And keep in mind, whenever you do sketches like these, you want to catalog them, you want to save them. You can always use this as a foundation to build up your creature concepts. Another great exercise is to actually put this in place and try to draw maybe 5 different creature concepts over this spine. If you're working traditionally, that means a light table and some paper or tracing paper or vellum. But that's always a great exercise to really stretch the imagination as well. So now we're going to do another very recognizable spine structure. This is actually from a raptor. So we're going to draw out and really pay special attention to the elongated spine and the curvature that we see within this type of character or creature. And again, this relates so well to so many various concepts that you could come up with. So by doing this, we can really start with a base, a foundational element, and we could work up from this, and we could create dragons. We could create creatures that have multiple sets of legs, and it just whatever your imagination can come up with. And that's really what you're going to learn throughout these lessons. I'm going to show you how to really stretch that concept. Start with the basics, start with a foundation like this, and then apply a bunch of different things over top, various wings, different legs, just different things to really get an idea going, and then elaborate from there. So you can see I stretch the proportions out a bit as well. So that's another thing that's really big in creature concepts. Now here we're going for a little bit more of what it would actually look like, a little bit closer to realism. But a big part of creature design concepts is to know when to really push the proportions. So really stretch the proportions. You can actually come up with some pretty imaginative ideas just with changing the proportions. There's just lots of little things that we associate as being correct by the way the proportions are done. So if you give something an overly long neck or a bigger than average tail, smaller head, for instance, if you make the head smaller, you're going to make the creature look more massive by the relationship of the body. Another trick is if you're doing this creature that you want to look very large and monstrous or whatever, you can give them these tiny little eyes, and just that comparison will generally make the head look larger. And so proportions are very important to either making something look realistic, like we're going for here, or making something looking a bit more fantasy based. So again, just kind of drawing through this, and notice too, just as far as the sketching part goes, that when I soft erase it down and I go to draw back through, that's when I come back in with the confident line making. In the beginning, I'm very much just scribbling in ideas, and I want to talk a lot about that through these lessons, because I always get a lot of students that will say that they struggle with getting their ideas down and the sketching process. Keep in mind that loose sketching and light sketching is very much part of the creative process. That's what allows you to see into the work and kind of figure things out. I don't always know exactly what something should look like. If you're working from reference, you have that as your guide as well. But the light sketch lines are a workup to finding the right line. So don't think about it as much as having to put the right line down exactly where it needs to go the first time, because I think that stagnates you, and it makes you a little too critical of your work too early on. You want to really let the sketch lines help you to find the right placement. Always nudging lines around, always moving things around. And then once I have a firm understanding of what should go on the page, that's when I come back with a more solid line, which is still not against soft erasing that and fixing that if I can make something better. So notice that spine's very elongated. Notice the proportion scales. There's a lot of similarities to even the human spine, but there's those major differences, like obviously the tail structure and the way the neck is elongated, and even the elongated cranium, and just lots of neat little details that you can study from there. And again, this is the foundation of how you'll start to understand different animals, and then you can start to put it all together and make just lots and lots of cool creature concepts. And what I really want to stress to you is, if you learn to pull certain characteristics from a variety of animals and from nature as inspiration, even plant life, insects, if you really get good at that, you're never going to run out of ideas. You're just going to have a multitude of possibilities. It's just amazing when you start to really think about that, and you start to really pay attention to the things around you. There's just tons and tons of great inspiration and reference. So like this right here, it's a skeletal structure of a fish, and it doesn't seem like much, but when you start to compare it to the differences that you see in the previous two examples, you realize that there's actually a lot of tiny differences going on. The structure of the head is very different. It's almost bird-like with a bit of a beak. The way that the spine runs right through the middle of the body in this perspective and fans out is very neat. the way that it has a top and bottom arch, that kind of fans in and connects to the spine. So these are just little details, but it gives you lots of great information to work from when you go to structure something. And one of the things I think is really neat about studying the spine is that we don't have to leave all that information on the inside of our character. It can be a foundational base where we apply anatomy over top, or it can be an exoskeleton, and you can come up with all sorts of neat ideas. In fact, I think some of the best alien creation type designs seem to always have a bit of fish-like qualities on the exterior of the body. And likewise, there's just so much great reference when it comes to aquatic life. It's just, there's so much that we're not used to seeing that it has much of almost an alien-like appearance. So there's a lot to be harnessed from that and studied from that. And that's why I really like doing these types of renditions. It's always a great warm-up, and it gives you just a bunch of ideas. I think almost a little bit subconsciously too. Just by creating these studies, it just makes you change your perception or your perspective on things a bit more. And then when you go to draw your own stuff, the ideas just kind of work themselves in. So I get a lot of people that ask, how do you come up with these ideas? How do you see these things and then, in your mind and then put them on paper? And I don't know that it's that conscious all the time, but by doing these studies, it becomes a little bit more subconscious and it just becomes almost reactionary. Uh, so you're sitting there putting down the work and you think, well, I'm having this really creative moment and I'm coming up with this great idea. But in all reality, it's just some sort of resemblance of life experience and things that you've practiced or done before. Maybe studied from even another artist or, life generally, and just lots and lots of sketches. You really want to sketch often to really get a confidence level with this type of stuff. And it's not always imaginative drawing. Sometimes it's a combination of realism and then putting your own spin on it. So another great technique for stuff like this is to actually draw a lot of the foundational information and then hide the reference and then just draw from your mind. In fact, I do that quite a bit because I want there to be more expression in the work. If I wanted just a picture, I would just grab a picture. So I try to make sure to experiment in that way. So make sure to do lots of studies like these, grab spines from all sorts of different animals, invertebrates, vertebrates, just everything you can get your hands on, and really study some of the shapes and designs that you see within there. And it will really help your creature design. In the next lesson, we're going to cover the cranium design a little bit more in a more imaginative way. So with that, let's press on.